Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. Today, we have a good friend of ours returning. We have Jennifer Gray Thompson. She is the CEO of After the Fire. So welcome back, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. I'm very happy to be back.
And one of the things I love is Jennifer and I started as colleagues and we're now friends. We've seen each other in person, which is awesome. And it's a pleasure to have you back because could you just briefly tell us, before we go into the actual topic of today's discussion, could you briefly tell us what After the Fire is?
Sure. So After the Fire is a 501c3 nonprofit. We were started in the midst of the 2017 mega fires in the North Bay of San Francisco, specifically to help our community recover, rebuild, and reimagine what our lives would look like after losing 8,900 structures in an unprecedented wildfire event. We were started as a regional nonprofit called Rebuild North Bay, covering 4 counties, Napa, Lake, Sonoma, and Mendocino. And then over the course of time, with all the subsequent fires, I started coaching other communities. And it turns out that there was a huge need for that in this era of mega fire. And since then, I've worked in about 18 mega fires across the American West. And so that's where we are today.
And you've actually grown quite a bit. I mean, I believe you're now in 13 states. Is that
well,
correct?
We will. You know, initially we thought here's where the fires are going to happen. But I think what we're learning through, now our drought is over in California, but the red flag warnings are in places they shouldn't be, right? Which is, in the upper Midwest. And so the way I view it now is wherever the mega fires occur, that's where we'll go.
Absolutely. And you guys do a very good job of that. And in addition to helping people recover from their wildfires, you're also helping people with mitigation, helping them with insurance and mortgages. You are now dealing with Washington, D.C. And yeah. I love this fact that you don't stop. You saw an injustice and you went after it. So could you please explain today's topic?
Sure. So HR 176 is really important. And, we've been doing advocacy since our very beginning. And I was very fortunate to be able to learn how to do it and then to figure out that it's actually not that hard if you are determined and organized and structured and can curate the right people, for the record. And so with this issue, though, is particularly important to us. HR 176 corrects a gross injustice in the federal tax law that means that any claimant wildfire, there are claimant and non-claimant. Claimants have like a utility is found at fault or something like that, something where there's a large class action suit. Any kind of proceeds that people get from that suit, from their settlement money, is actually taxed as full income tax, which is terrible on many, many reasons. Because if I hit you with my car and you sued me and you got a settlement, that is non-taxable. But if I am part of a huge disaster and if a utility is found at fault somehow, then I not only have to pay personal income taxes on the settlement, I cannot deduct my attorney's fees. That's something that was put into the 2017 tax bill for tax reform. I'm not sure how it got there or who advocated for it, but it's very strange. And so once we realized that this was happening about 2 years ago, we took the issue to Congressman Mike Thompson. At that time, the House was under Democrat leadership. Once it didn't pass during that period, now Congressman LaMalfa out of Butte County is a GOP, and he is a Republican. He's the lead on it. So we're really been working hard.
Mm-hmm. So you're working across party lines, which I absolutely love. I mean, it's for everybody.
We always have, we always will. When I sit there, it's not about my personal way that I vote. It has nothing to do with that. I'm there representing every single fire survivor, no matter what we're doing. And so it's very important to me to be very bipartisan, to not bring my own political opinions into it, and to remember exactly why I'm there, which is for the people and this gross injustice.
Yeah, and I do want to paint a quick picture so people understand. With respect to wildfires, you and I have a pretty good background. Well, you obviously have more background than I do. Mine's more the insurance. But people are vacating their homes, running with maybe their phone, maybe their pajamas. And could you paint that picture of what you've seen with some of the evacuations and how quickly fire moves?
These are mega fires. These are not like wildfires. We used to have the occasional mega fire, and it was defined as any fire over 100,000 acres. But it's really been like reimagined because that's what's happened to us as Also, a fire that has an outsized impact on a community. So it can be under 100,000 acres, but if it takes out 900 homes, that's a mega fire. And it also behaves differently because we've had years and years of mega drought. That means that the fuel, everything is ripe for disaster at this point. Our forest lands are out of balance. Well-meaning, wanting to keep the air clean. And, our generation was raised telling, only you can prevent wildfire, which meant that we were trying to prevent all fire, which was a huge mistake because it's not what indigenous people did at all.
Yeah.
And so mega fires, they spark and then they move fast. We're talking a football field every 3 seconds. What happened here in 2017, CAL FIRE had never seen that kind of fire behavior. So there wasn't concern when people called from 20 miles away in Santa Rosa seeing a fire, over the ridge in Napa County. They were like, should I be concerned? And dispatch was like, no, it can't possibly get to you. But just 4 hours later, they were running for their lives, many of them in their clothes or not clothes at all, just with embers everywhere, because the mega fires are not only fast and hot, but they send their embers up to 5 miles ahead. It's a very different animal.
And fire tornadoes. Let's not forget fire tornadoes.
Fire-nados, yes. The first time I really saw one of those was in the Carr fire, and that was in Redding, and that was really something to see. It was just terrifying. Mega fires are, in fact, terrifying, but they're also solvable. So,
which is good. Joel, did you have any? I'm sorry, I didn't introduce Joel Vendette, my co-host today with Home for Home. I totally skipped on that.
Hi. I think I know. What I want to talk about is what's going on with insurance in California. And for those who don't know, State Farm, and I think it's Allstate, have both pulled out for homeowners policy because of the fires. So they're not issuing new policies.
Yes.
Now, more are lined up, by the way.
Yeah. But so I think my concern is there will be a trickle down. It's not going to end with California. It is going to go state by state by state where these companies, it happened in Florida after the hurricanes, where people start losing their insurance because of natural disaster. What the hell are people supposed to do?
Well, here's the thing is, I am not an insurance expert, but I am a community expert. And I believe that we have no choice but through it. And we have to innovate and collaborate, because the current structure of what we're doing is you regulate and retreat. And there's this whole space in between there, which is full of innovations and technologies and ideas. And, as Californians or anybody in a wildfire prone area, we're going to have to change our aesthetic about how our houses look. IBHS has the Wildfire Prepared Program that says nothing within 5 feet of your home. That's going to be hard for people. Some people will do it. Some people will just say, I can't do it. Well, we need to have a third option for that too. And there are amazing technologies out there to build resilience for homes so that we can actually live very comfortably alongside wildfire without having mega fires. But we have to do our part. We've got to change, and it can't just be, I love a go bag, big proponent, but it also has to be like, how are we actually living and next door to each other? Because I can change, but in my neighborhood, if I change but the other 60 houses don't, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the big issues for the insurance companies, which is why we're seeing what we're seeing, is the cost to rebuild. And so it's like, and then when you start talking about doing something new that may be better to withstand the fire, you're going to have even more costs associated with that. So I think it's like, I would imagine.
And shortage of labor. Don't forget shortage of labor.
Oh, it's huge. And so there's like 3 things to unpack there. And one of them is that the nice thing about the technologies that are here just aren't well known at all and need to get through a regulatory process, especially in California, is they can actually fortify homes that have not burned down. We don't have to burn down to learn the lesson or become more resilient. We just don't. So there are things, like there's a nanotechnology that you can actually, it's being put into paint from a large paint manufacturer that will allow us to paint our homes with fire retardant that is non-toxic. Like that, those are things that we can do. We can paint our fences. We can change our fences out for gates. And if the insurance companies say, okay, we'll keep you, we won't raise your rates if you do this, that's a huge incentive for a lot of people. So I really, we need a lot more knowledge and a much bigger scale and implementation and awareness of what's out there that goes well beyond regulate and retreat. The thing about rebuild costs is that when people have not yet burned down and they're looking at their policies and they think, well, this seems like a very, reasonable amount to replace my house. That what they're thinking is, if I had to go buy another house just like mine, what would that cost? That's not the reality in a community after a mega fire at all. You're talking huge, like it can be triple the cost easy.
Well, yeah.
I mean, and it's so funny because it just feels like, sorry to interrupt, but it's like, I mean, all the stuff that like, it'd be great if the insurance company said, oh, if you do these things, but I mean, I've never really heard of any insurance company. I mean, sorry, it's just like, for me, it's like, I've never heard of an insurance company working with you on a preventative measure.
Well, I think they're going to, though.
Yeah,
I think they're absolutely, and then, State Farm has actually been working with, which is interesting because they're the ones that pulled out new policies. But there are insurance companies talking to, IBHS is actually funded by insurance companies.
Could you say what IBHS stands for?
Oh, the Institute for Business and Home Safety. Not the sexiest name on the planet, but really an amazing organization. It's a research organization, like a research nonprofit arm of the insurance industry, full of passionate people and scientists, and it's all, it's science-based what they're talking about. And they are, the insurance companies are asking for preventative solutions in the state of California, particularly because they don't want to exit the market. They don't. We are, in 2023, we are the 4th largest economy in the world. Look at our land values. We are a revenue dream, but we're also a drain dream. So we have to figure that out because insurance companies are for profit. So anyway, there's a third way.
I always remind people, yes, insurance companies are for profit. They need to make money. If they don't make money, they go out of business and then they go away for everybody. But Joel, just to go back on the insurance side of things, it is pretty complicated because depending on the state of which you are working in, you have certain regulations and rules you have to follow, depending on how forward-thinking that industry is or how that department is, depends on what you can or cannot do. California is a bit tough, always has historically been tough. So that's why in the past we've lost insurance carriers and they keep coming and going and coming and going. But that mitigation measure is the key. And that's what Jennifer was talking about with the nanos in the paint and everything like that. Defensive space, nothing within 5 feet of your house, not even mulch, anything that could catch on fire.
Especially not mulch. Mulch, even if you won't give up the rest of your plants, whatever, it's fine. Do not put mulch up against your house. It's burnt. And oh my God, the people who put wood chips up against their house, because from the chipper program, it's meant to reduce our wildfire risk, which is a cool program, but don't pick up those chips and then spread them all around your house. That's like, I've seen that a lot, and please don't do that.
Yeah, it's just a nice little bed of embers.
I know, I'm all every time. My neighbor across the street.
Right now, when you're trying to sell a home in California, there's a new disclosure that you have to do, and it is the wildfire disclosure. So with that, you get your NHD report, natural hazard disclosure, and it'll tell you if you're in a high or a very high severe fire zone. Some places, and I don't know if it's everywhere, but I believe if you are in those things, you now have to have a city inspection come out or an inspector come out to evaluate your home, which is becoming a whole nother set of issues for people because I don't have the money to do it. It's not going to be done before I close my escrow. So how do we deal with this within the year that we have afterwards? I think it's a year. Don't quote me on that. But so, there are things that are happening, but they're not feasible, like you said, for a lot of people, because if you're buying a property, you want that work done prior. And the seller is like, well, I don't have the money to do it. And it's now yours in 30 days. So why do it's a whole thing.
Well, you actually are, what you're really talking about too is an equity issue. And this is, when we talk about climate and equity, you have to think about the issue that you just brought up. Mm-hmm. We don't want to make it so that only privileged people who make a certain amount of money can live in the places that are, fire prone. I know it's just, we just can't do it. And besides, it's not even realistic because so many of the places that are fire vulnerable also hold naturally occurring affordable housing, especially in the state of California. So there has to be another way to actually build equity in. And there is too, like Biden-Harris administration has been really good about putting the money out there, but accessing the money is still something that we have not cracked well enough, but it is there for resilience. We actually, in Sonoma County, where I live, we were the recipients of an $80 million BRIC grant from FEMA that is now being used for resilience in particular. but joining all of these forces, private, public, nonprofit sector, is what's needed. We do remain somewhat siloed, and that's something that I'm always trying to break down and put people who wouldn't normally be in the same room together in the same room.
If you have the silos up, I hate silos personally. I think it's something like this, also sustainability in general. You cannot have a silo. You're talking to too many different people, too many different departments. And if you're locked in one room, it's never going to happen. But I want to bring it back to the way to solve this is apparently mitigation. Myriad of things we can do, but the mitigation is very important. And bringing it back to after the fire, the work that you do, you stick with people. You don't just show up for a photo op or, here's some paperwork. Call me when you get back on your feet. You're there for years.
Yeah. And, and it's interesting, and I love this work so much, and it's often unfunded. And I wish that people understood that. Like yesterday I was on the phone with Santiam Canyon, and we're going to do this, they just got a at fault, decision about their fire. And so certain people get to do a class action suit against a utility. And I say get to, because for other people, there's no way forward. And so just really getting together with some leaders and talking about, what does that mean when the attorneys start running into town, and how do you find the ones that are ethical versus the ones that are not?
That would come in and take people's money and leave.
Oh my God. I have so many stories. It's just so, and then there's builders who are good. And so how do you actually navigate that space? And that's where I bring my whole network of people into it. And they are almost 3 years post-disaster. That's like the work that I most love to do, is not to go in as a transaction, but to go in as a human being. That's the beauty of doing disaster work, is it's humanity at its very best. It transcends politics. It transcends even class differences if you do it right. I did have to buy a truck because they couldn't get over my Volvo. That's the only barrier that I've ever had that I had to make a major adjustment. So I do stay with them for years. Yeah, it's a nice truck. I love it. But I do stay with them for years, and it's actually an honor, because I feel like the mentoring, at some point, the mentoring stops and the collegial part begins, where they become peers, and then I actually can deploy them to help future or current wildfire communities. It's something I do a lot and really, really love.
Yeah, I saw that at your conference last year. You brought people that were wildfire victims that are now resilient, that are now helping other people with their experiences and their knowledge, which is very important. Again, breaking down the silos, breaking down the walls. What's the plan with this, with HR 176? How are things looking with that?
It's been a bit of a slippery eel. I took a delegation of 14 people from every mega fire across California, and also 3 people from the Marshall Fire joined us, which was really kind. I love working with them. They're out of Boulder, Colorado. And we went to DC, and we spent 2 days doing hardcore 9 miles a day lobbying between the House and the Senate. And by the way, all of us come from different backgrounds, different types of fires, and or suburban to frontier to rural. And we got along. We just rode in the same direction right away. I was the only one who knew all of them. I'm really proud of that effort. It did make a difference, but then it was supposed to be in the debt ceiling. Changing an IRS tax law is actually really difficult because it's around finance. We don't want it to become weaponized by either side, saying, oh, the CBO said the impact is like $660 million. Well, it never should have been assessed anyway, because it's not the federal government's money. No. So, and I'm not anti-government, but I am anti-this. And so, so we didn't go into the debt ceiling. And then I've been assured that it will be an amendment in a disaster bill about to be finished. The text is almost finished from what I'm told, and it should be introduced in September. In the House, it will be introduced by, I don't think it's not Lamalfa, it's somebody else, but they've asked for an amendment on that bill. And we're just going to push really hard to make sure that it's included, because in California, we have an October deadline to file taxes from last year. We got an extension because of the floods and the federal declarations. And so I think about the people who have nothing, are using that money in order to rebuild their home, but now they have a giant tax bill on top of it, and they're going to incur penalties and fees. So there's an urgency to it, and I'm unwilling to accept that it can't be done, or that other things are more important and should get in the way.
Oh, I mean, the fact, let's just revisit the fact that some of these people left their house with nothing.
Yeah.
Some people ran, cell phone in hand. Maybe they had their clothes on, maybe they did not.
Often did not.
A lot of them did not. So these are people that literally had nothing. And they finally get some funding to rebuild their lives from literally zero. And you're faced with a tax bill because this is being deemed income. That's kicking someone when they're already down and pummeling them.
I have a worse story. So a woman called me about 3 months ago. She was in the campfire. So when she was evacuating, which took hours, she was hit by another car and her truck was totaled and she had medical bills because she was injured. She loses her house. So she makes it through that and she's waiting and trying to wait it out. But in 2020, she moves to Marion County, Central Oregon, where then she experiences the Beachy Creek fire, the Santiam Canyon fire, right? So she doesn't lose her house this time, but just the trauma of that. So she calls me because she hears about what we're doing for the tax bill. She tells me that her attorneys charged her 45%. Yep, she signed up for that because people don't know. I mean, she wasn't stupid. She just doesn't know. And now she had a medical bill. So they got her settlement, paid the medical bill, and called her to say that there's nothing left. But she's going to get a big tax bill.
Jesus. Sorry.
Yeah.
And that's
yeah. Oh, here's just really quickly. If you're a veteran too, like you served this country and you have income-based benefits like college for your children, and all of a sudden, you've got kids in college, you're about to go to college, and this, say $100,000 or $200,000, whatever gets taxed onto your personal income tax, it kicks you out of all of that, kicks you out of Covered California, kicks you out of all of your income-based benefits as well. So it has far-reaching consequences, and it has to be fixed.
Yeah, I didn't know that, and I'm a huge supporter of veterans, so that's extremely upsetting. I do hope this passes. I don't personally understand how this ever became law, and federal law, how this even came to be. What someone thought, hey, this is a great idea. Let's tax people while they're down.
I don't think anybody. I think that they weren't used to having disasters that had a corporate entity found at fault. And so they were not prepared for that reality. I don't know how the attorney's fees got in there in 2017. That was clearly somebody behind the scenes doing something weird. But I think it was an accident, an unintended consequence of a policy. And all we're asking for is to fix that unintended consequence, because it's fairly new and unusual to have these massive class action claims against an entity like PG&E. And
we are seeing these mega fires, not just in California anymore. I mean, right now, I grew up in Michigan. I have friends now complaining Detroit's covered in smoke, New York a couple weeks ago. And it's like, welcome to what we deal with.
Yeah. I mean, you hate to see people do it. You hate to see it, but it's also like I often go to conferences nationally, and I'm like the one wildfire person at these things. 99% of the time, it's actually highly unusual to have another wildfire person there. And most of the talent and most of the efforts go into what's already known, which is wind and rain events. And most of our system is set up for that. So one of the things that I do is raise awareness nationally, become a voice, for all of the people over here who've been suffering, and also to remind them, like, please ask us to the table. I always tell them there's way more people than me in this space, but I tend to be like the one that they're like, there's that wildfire lady.
Come join us. Speak.
Come join us. Yeah.
Yeah, and you spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C. meeting with these people, but before I do want people to learn how to find you, but before we go to that part, mitigation is key. We're not going to get our insurance back without that. There are people talking about things called captive insurance and parametric insurance. Jennifer and I have talked about that in length, and one day it'll get moving forward. But if we have to work together as a community to mitigate this, stop it before it starts. It's cheaper in the long run than recovery. That being said, with respect to after the fire, how can they find you? How can they get help from you guys if they need it? Or how can they offer their help?
Sure. So our website is afterthefireusa.org. So you can find us there. We also have a YouTube channel. You can go on there and see like some of the things that we do, including the summit. It is After the Fire USA. Otherwise, you're going to get like an 80s band. So that. And then check out what we do. We have a podcast called How to Disaster. And then I'm starting a second podcast about women in climate leadership. So, you can look around, but the How to Disaster podcast is on all major platforms. So, yeah.
And I have been a guest on How to Disaster.
Yeah, that's right.
It was a lot of fun. I talked for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to go like I'm very talkative, as you can tell, and so I tend to go as long as I want to. Even, and I'm sure that people like after 20 minutes are going off to do their laundry or something different. But it's self-indulgent, but I like it.
And it's informative. It is very informative, and I love the fact we found each other in this whole wildfire space, because it's taking over. It's our new normal that we now have to deal with. We have to start addressing this.
And one of the concerns is that, I think we're going to have a quiet year this year. I'm not totally sure, but, I'm looking at Central Oregon and above, and looking at Michigan, and looking at Idaho and Colorado, and some places that have higher vulnerability than usual, and holding my breath. And the really kind of the danger is that if we don't get a mega fire, then people think it's done. I'd be fine with that, because I can convince them it's not, because in Canada, by a month ago, over 10 million acres had burned, like way early. So they are getting that smoke in Chicago and in Michigan. It's just sad, but yeah, we have to get through it. We can.
And with the rain that we've gotten in California, that just means more growth, and it will dry.
It will dry, but luckily, I live between two CAL FIRE chiefs, which is my my wildfire protection plan. But so I have a lot of conversations with one, and he's, the nice thing is that the relative humidity is in the ground for this year. So much rain that at night, what's been happening is when there's no relative humidity, no moisture in the ground, then at night it gets like the fires have been moving faster, not slower. But they used to depend on the RH level coming up at night and slowing the fires down. So we can count on that for this year. It doesn't mean that we can count on it for next year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge and your expertise in this. And please keep going to Washington, D.C. and get this bill passed or amended. It's important. We shouldn't be penalizing people when they're already having the worst experience of their life.
Right. And thank you so much for having me and helping me get this message out, because we are it's very time sensitive. And if anything anybody can think to do, write a letter, voice your support with your own congressperson so they're aware of it. Although if you have like Ted Lieu, he definitely knows about it. So it just depends. But I appreciate you giving me the space and the time to talk about this. Thank you as always.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And, welcome anytime, any updates. You got to come back and keep us informed. It's important stuff.
I will do. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Wendy Nystrom, host with Environmental Social Justice, co-host Joel Vendette with Home for a Home. And thank you again, Jennifer Gray Thompson, After the Fire USA. Please check them out. Good information there. You guys take care.
Thank you.